Hi, I'm Kit Bowen.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and this is the Creation Entertainment Podcast. We're so glad you've joined us. Up first, Adam Malin interviews composer Jeff Russo, a huge get for us. We're really excited about this interview. They talk about Jeff Russo's early career as well as more recent shows where he's composing for Paramount's Star Trek as well as Fargo. You're going to love this interview.
And on the Pulp Culture Cinema Squad, Adam and I are going to talk about the season finale of Severance, the AppleTV series, season 2. Oh boy, guys, it was a doozy. We cannot wait for season 3. And in the Creation Looks Back segment, Adam and Gary talk about their early days doing conventions and the different venues that they ended up going to. Stay tuned, it's great.
And next, we'll have a fun segment in which I talk with Gary Berman, co-CEO of Creation Entertainment. He's going to give you all kinds of really cool and important business advice. You're not going to want to miss this because he's been doing this for over 50 years. Trust me.
It's going to be a good show.
It already is, actually. And one more thing to talk to you about. Supernatural fans, they've got something to look forward to, right?
Yeah, so stay tuned after the podcast and we'll talk about the next upcoming The Road So Far, The Road Ahead show.
All that and so much more on the Creation Entertainment Podcast.
Recently, I had the opportunity to interview Jeff Russo, the prolific composer, songwriter, guitarist, vocalist, and music producer of so many different projects, and of course known to Star Trek fans for his work on Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, as well as many other projects, including For All Mankind, Ron Moore's show, Fargo, Legion, and the upcoming Alien Earth for amazing director and writer Noah Hawley. He's also the founding member of the seminal 90s rock band Tonic, as well as the Americana band Low Stars, and he won a Primetime Emmy Award for his work on Fargo. In my conversation with Jeff, we covered a wide range of subjects, not the least of which was his incredible work on Star Trek and his canon of work for Noah Hawley, but also sort of the foundations of his work in rock, his love of the guitar, instrumentation and orchestration, and his many influences, as well as a few tantalizing hints of upcoming projects. I hope you enjoy my interview with Jeff as much as I enjoyed having a wonderful conversation with him. Jeff Russo, welcome to Creation Entertainment's Interview Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here, Jeffrey. And we've actually worked with you several times at our Vegas show. And it's a pleasure to have you with us. And you've had a fascinating career. And I think most of our viewers are pretty familiar with it. But for the sake of those that haven't, if you don't mind, we'll do a biographical review. And
no problem.
Sort of start with kind of your musical roots. I won't get too personal with you, but where did your love of music come from? I know you're really fluent in a lot of instruments, but I know guitar is a special love for you. How did you kind of first get involved with music? What sort of training did you have? And how did you become obsessed with guitar, which is such a wonderful instrument?
Well, first, I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm not sure how where the love of music came from for me. You know, I grew up just in a pretty typical household. My dad liked classical music. My mom listened to sort of 40s and 50s music, but I don't really actually remember her listening to music as much as I remember my dad playing classical music in the house. But I was a typical kid, liking pop music and of the time. And I think in the 4th grade or something, they were like, you got to choose an instrument. And I think my parents chose violin for me. So I played violin for a minute. And then in the 5th grade, I think I played clarinet for a minute. And then in the 6th grade, I started playing drums in the orchestra. And it was just like one of those things where I just enjoyed playing music. Like, I don't know why. Like I never really studied music. Certainly I played we did the Suzuki method in fourth grade with the violin, and we did the same style of learning the clarinet, and then I started learning drums, but it was just sort of field snare. And then in the seventh grade, my dad got really sick and he died when I was 12.
Yeah.
And my mom got me a drum kit. My next door neighbor, like, agreed, like, play whenever you want, but when I get home, it would be great if you don't play between, like, whatever, 7 and 10, like after 7 p.m. or whatever. So I used to come home from school and put on headphones and listen to Rush records and listen to um, Led Zeppelin records and listen to all the rock records of the 70s, and in the early 80s. I was listening to and learning all those drum parts and just playing along to those records. That was really,
In all fairness, Neil Peart is an unbelievable
oh
drummer.
my God, he was incredible. I mean,
But
he's one of the greatest drummers to ever play rock. Yeah.
going down,
So
like 10 different tom
a
sizes
lot
and
of like big drum kit, yeah.
big tom roll downs and
That
stuff.
was that was really the beginning of my being, into music. And then I started playing drums in a band in high school. We did covers. We did Cars covers and U2 covers, and we were just a cover band. And we played at I don't remember what we played. We played at a dance or something. I don't know what we did. And what I realized was the guitar player was getting all the girls. And I was like, I like drums, but I think I want to play guitar. So the guitar player used to leave his guitar at my house because we would rehearse at my house, so I don't have to move the drums to the guitar player's house. He
Fatal
left
mistake.
he left his guitar at my house, and I taught myself how to play guitar. Just like picked it up and started figuring out how to play it. And then I became a guitar player. And that was sort of you know, I started writing songs. I started playing with a friend of mine in high school, and we made a band. And then the rest is sort of history. Then I had bands, and then I came out to LA, tried to get a record deal, like did the whole thing, and then finally got a record deal.
All right, let's pull back for a second because your scoring work has a lot of wonderful classical and romantic influence. So what were the kinds of classical music that your dad was listening to? Because I think it embedded itself in your DNA. What sort of classical music was dad onto?
I mean, all the typical things. Like he was very into Rachmaninoff. He was very into Beethoven. He's very into Mozart. You know, I mean, he would never let me listen to Wagner, right? So Wagner, he would never let me listen to. He was like, no, no Wagner in my house. My
That,
father was
is that
actually
because of the whole Germanic thing,
yeah, it
or
was there was a German thing. Like, the fact of the matter is, like, I didn't know any better, and I was 8 when he was saying this stuff, and my dad was European, so he had this very thick European accent. Do not listen to Wagner in my house, like,
what about
and
the Russian late Romantics, early 20th
yeah, I mean,
century?
my dad was Eastern European, so the Russian masters of that era of classical music were certainly a part of it. And I dove deep into the Russian sound for when I sort of started listening to stuff for inspiration for Fargo. I started really diving into that. But all that to say, like, this all that is preceded by the fact that I had no designs on doing anything orchestral or designs doing anything sort of from a compositional standpoint. When I was writing rock songs, I wanted to be a rock star. That's what I wanted to be when I was a in high school. I wanted to be a lead guitar player in my band. And that's sort of that was my jumping off point. I never really even considered writing instrumental orchestral music before. you know, it wasn't until much later that became something that I even figured out that I could do. Like, I didn't even know that I could do it until somebody said, "Hey, this score we want you to do, this is going to be orchestral, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then I just had to figure out how to do, how to do it. So, um,
Well, but your experiences with Tonic and with Low Stars, I think, did inform your the fact that you were growing as an arranger. But let me just pull back a little bit more. I love Tonic. It's an incredible band, and Lemon Parade for me is a great album. So Just kind of, how did Tonic come about in the first place? I mean, how did that whole story begin?
I mean, again, it's so funny. My story with this is sort of everything about my musical career has been, you know, being in a specific place at a specific time and meeting a specific person, or getting involved in doing a thing right at the right time. And so I had left New York with my dear friend who I was in a band with then when I was 17 when I
Yeah.
left New York. And another dear friend of mine, his name is Lenny Kravitz. You might know, he has written a number.
Interesting talent.
Yeah. So I've known Lenny since I was like 16. I met him when I was 16. And I learned how to play all the instruments that I know how to play by watching him and being in a studio with him and trying to emulate his style of playing, because he was very much in the sort of 60s, 70s rock style of playing at the time.
Yeah.
And my sense of harmony comes very much deeply embedded in my learning how to harmonize from watching him harmonize with himself, making that first record, which I was there when they were making that first record. And so I went from that coming to LA and trying to make that work. And then that sort of not working out. Lenny went off and did more records on his own. I stopped playing with this person I had been playing in a band with at the time, and then didn't really know what I was going to do. And I walked into a pool hall, the Hollywood Athletic Club, September of 1992, October of 1992, something like that. And Emerson Hart, who's the singer in Tonic, was there, and he was the manager of the place. And I had known Emerson from New York because we were both teenage actors. Like I was a commercial actor, and we used to see each other on these auditions when we were in high school. So I knew Emerson then, and I walked in and saw him there. I was like, "Hey, I know you." And he said the same to me, and we just started talking, and he started telling me about his musical endeavors. He was like writing songs, and I was like, well, I've been looking to start a band because I was in this band and now I'm not. And so he said, let's get together and work on some music. And we did. And in that very first time that we sat down together, he was like, what do you think of this? And he played me bits of If You Can Only See. And I was like, wow, that's going to be great. Like we should try to put this with the band and try to do this. And like we sort of made it into a song. And that was how my my relationship with Emerson sort of began, and we formed the band. And we did a lot of work over the next like 3 years, like getting different musicians to play with us and different studios and different producers. And finally we fell into a drummer, Kevin Shepard, and a bass player. His name is Dan Rothschild. And we made a record with Jack Joseph Puig because we got a record deal. And after playing a bunch of shows at the Mint, which was a small little blues club here in LA, and every Sunday night they would do this rock evening, and we would play there almost every Sunday night. And it just turned into us making a record and continuing on. But the important part of that story is sort of like walking in and seeing people that I haven't seen in a while, being in the right place at the right time, and like meeting the person and the right, it's all of it is so fortuitous.
I mean, Emerson is such a strong vocalist. Who was writing the lyrics?
Emerson.
Yeah. So, did lyrics begat the music, or did music begat the lyrics, or was it just the kernels of individual riffs or motifs? How did the song structure how did the songs construct themselves? What was the
Well, it's interesting. Like with If You Can Only See, I mean, I think that Emerson just sat down and really just started to sing If You Could Only See the Way She Loves Me, and maybe you don't understand. And I think that it was that the lyric and the melody and the music all came at the same time to him. I actually don't know that because I wasn't there when that was conceived. But as the song went through various stages of creation. You know, there was like a different verse back then, and we recorded it differently. And then it changed. And then when we went to make the record, I had this guitar riff, bam, 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 that I was like, let's do that in between the first verses and the in between the chorus and the second verse, and like that could be a thing. It was very sort of Zeppelin-y that I mean it wasn't, but it felt like right for what we were doing, and little bits of things got added to that particular song. Like other songs happened in a different way. Like Open Up Your Eyes, there was a riff, and that riff began the thing. And then I think Emerson sang the lyric on top of the riff, and he was writing lyrics at home, bringing them in and singing stuff, and we were, you know what I mean, like there wasn't really one particular way that we as a band were creating songs. I know Emerson would sit by himself and write a song, with his acoustic guitar, and I would sit at home and write a riff or whatever, or write music or write melodies and stuff and bring it to him, and then he would either say, that's working, or no, that's not, and then how do we put that with this piece or that, there was a million different ways.
And so it's organic and it's fascinating. But
Yeah.
like mid 90s, we're all into the digital era. What were you recording on? Were you already working with music software? What or just a hard?
No, we in our entire careers, in our first three records anyway, like that first record was 100% analog. We never had anything digital.
Track or
No, we were recording on a 24 track. Yeah, we were looping them together, with time code and doing stuff like that, so we have more tracks. But we didn't get into any sort of digital recording until the second record, where we had a Pro Tools engineer also running side by side with analog. And then it wasn't until we made a record with Bob Rock, our third record, that we were like, yeah, we just sort of went full digital. But I myself didn't really start working in that domain for myself until after our third record.
all right. Well, so how did you start the transition into scoring? How did that all come about
You
then?
know, this is a very interesting story too. Like, so in 1999, I was asked to be in a movie, to play guitar player, to play a musician who lives in a building. And it's this movie called Hollywood Palms. And the director knew I was a guitar player in the band, right? And he said, you should come down to the composer's studio and play guitar on the score. I was like, great. So I did that, and I played, and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. This is kind of an interesting thing, playing music to picture, and that seemed sort of interesting to me. And that's when I met my dear friend Ben Decter, who is a composer, and we are dear friends to this day. And then I sort of was done with that, and then I went back and made another record with Tonic and continued that whole thing. And in 2006, Emerson and I mean, I should say, Emerson decided he wanted to take a break from the band, make a solo record. And I had a decision. I was like, well, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do. Like, I didn't know whether or not I wanted to make a solo record. I didn't know if I wanted to be the front man singer. I tried it, made a record. I wasn't really.
The Low Stars project hadn't started yet,
The
had it?
Low Stars project is happening now at this time that I'm talking about. This is what I'm saying. So like I didn't know if I wanted to make a solo record. So I ended up forming the Low Stars with a couple of other friends of mine because, I'm a very collaborative guy rather than wanting to be the person at the front of the stage doing the thing myself. And we made that record. We made that record, and after sitting around my living room playing and singing songs, the four of us, like, harmonizing like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, which is what we wanted to be. We wanted to be like a CSNY or an Eagles or, any one of those types of bands, right? So we made that record, went on tour, and then that band sort of fell apart because, as bands do, like, either they work or they don't. And we had a great time, but we were never really going to make another record. And at that moment, I kind of needed to figure out what I was going to do. And I came back home, and a dear friend of my wife's, her name is Wendy Melvoin of the duo Wendy and Lisa from Prince's band. They they are and were and have been and continue to be composers in their own right. So Wendy asked me to come down to her studio and sort of sit in, watch, see what they're doing. And they were working on a couple of things, a little show called Heroes at the time, and
Part of the show.
and yes, it was. And they were also working on another show called Crossing Jordan.
Yeah, right.
And so at the time, I was just sort of watching everything, and I sort of really dug it. And then at one point, I remember Lisa asking me, like, how do you feel? Like, would you want to try to write a cue? Like, let's see what you can do. And the idea was I had to write a cue as though I were them, right? I was going to be writing something that they would use as themselves.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I can do that. And if I have the right material, let me see if I can do that. I ended up writing an episode for them. They were like, wow, this is really great. It sounded really great. Everybody was happy, and I then was and I was talking, this was on Crossing Jordan, and then I went on to write a bunch of music for them because Lisa went to go have a baby and needed to be on maternity leave, and Wendy was like, I can't do Heroes and this other show at the same time by myself. Can you write some of this music? And I did, and it ended up working out great. I wrote the entirety or most of the last season of that show for them. So that sort of gave me my experience, like being under the gun, network television, understanding how deliveries were made, and like what the idea was, but and like how to put music to picture and all these things.
Well, were at this point, were you still or working in Pro Tools yourself? And
Yeah, they worked in Pro Tools and Logic,
yeah,
and I did the same thing. I sequenced in Pro Tools, but used Logic as a instrument host. That's how they used it.
right.
Um, and we were all sequencing in Pro Tools because all of us came from the pop world. And if you were from the pop world or rock world, you knew Pro Tools because that was sort of the gold standard in recording studios for recording live music, right?
Yeah. Were you using virtual instruments or real
Yeah.
instruments?
I was a combination of all of the above. Like I was playing stuff, I was using samples, it was a bunch of things. For the stuff that I was writing for them, they would create sample libraries of themselves and then use that in the creation of the score. So they just gave me all that material and I was able to put together the score that way.
And so for the layperson, writing a cue is sort of based on a show beat. Is that correct? Or
I mean, you're watching the show, you're like, okay, we're going to put music here and we're going to end it here and it's going to try to do this with the episode, whether or with that particular scene. Either it's got to be tense or it's got to be romantic or it's got to be, and you have to
the
watch the
beat?
beats and sort of see how that plays and then you put
Yeah.
music to it. That all came very naturally to me. And I mean, I would credit my acting coach from when I was 16 to that because what you learn as an actor when you study acting is you learn how to manage what you want to get across to an audience, like emotional beats and tense beats, and like how to manipulate an audience's feelings, right? So my understanding of how an actor is supposed to do that made it very easy for me to understand how I was supposed to do that as a musician, and how music was going to help either underscore or play against or push forward or pull back on any given scene. So I worked for Wendy and Lisa for about a year,
Yeah.
and then that ended. Then I stopped working for Wendy and Lisa, and then went out to try to get my own work. And that last I tried. I didn't get a job for to almost 2 years.
Before we move forward, let's just talk a bit about you having been an actor and trying to inform the emotionality of a scene through your music. Just talk for just a moment about good melodic writing. For me, lyrical, good melodic writing is the secret of music and creating good melodics, and I think lyrical melodics is one of our life's missions.
Well, I think that there are people who might disagree with you. I think that it's all a matter of taste. It's all very subjective, right? Like some scores require that kind of approach where you want to be lyrical, you want to be melodic, you want it to guide the emotion. And some scores are exactly the opposite of that. Some scores are like, do not get in the way.
Right.
Make it so nobody even knows you're there.
Like more like pads,
Well, I mean, it could be pads,
atmosphere.
or it's not quite as simplistic as that because that's a pretty complex way to write as well.
Yeah.
You know, I know it's counterintuitive to think that that kind of music would be easy to do. It's not. It's
Yeah.
actually it can be more difficult to try to speak without speaking, to try to engage an audience without them noticing, right?
Yeah.
That can be very complicated as well. So while I agree with what you're saying, I'm very much in favor of melody. I'm very much in favor of that style of writing. And when I'm told by a filmmaker, no melody, there's too much melody here, I have a very difficult time. I have a very difficult time like dialing back the melody. And then I sit back and I listen. I'm like, but this doesn't feel finished now. Like now I need to, how can I finish it without that melody? Like, what do I do? So, again, it's all subjective. Music is a very subjective thing. And like what is good for one person might not be good for the other.
Especially the showrunner who may or may not want music that's more melodically based or not. This is sort of a famous thing from Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek series, they specifically told the composers don't really be melodic and don't really create character motifs, which to me is, seems perfectly logical that you would do that. But, as you're saying, you're
But
working for a showrunner that may or may not want that approach.
here's an interesting part. Being one of the Star Trek composers, I've had the opportunity to talk specifically and directly to those composers that you're talking about.
Right.
And I've also had the opportunity to listen to that music free of anything else. Like I wanted to study like what Jay Chataway did, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of dive deep. So what you will find is that yes, the stories are no melody, just be very sort of wallpapery. I know like there's a lot of talk in the Trek verse about Rick Berman saying very much that thing. Like I've never met Rick, I don't know Rick, but I've heard those stories. But what you realize is that is not exactly what those composers did. Those composers were actually extremely deft
Yeah.
at doing that score, those scores, like we're talking about Next Generation mainly, like what happened when they transitioned from season 1 into season 2 and they sort of changed direction in terms of how they were going to make the score. And if you go back and you listen to those scores, they don't sound very wallpapery. The way they were utilizing the music was very wallpapery, but the music itself is still very sort of complex, dense, and very moving. And I always find it very interesting to like have that conversation with a Star Trek fan, like, oh yeah, like seasons 2 through 6 of Next Generation. It was like there was no music. And I was like, you guys haven't listened.
You mentioned the great Jay Chataway. You don't have to look any further than Inner Light
Oh,
to
of course.
an effusive, glowing, melodic, lyrical piece of work.
Oh, I know.
So there you go.
I mean, I based the main section, first section of the melody of the Picard theme on a throwaway melody from that episode. He had a throwaway melody that Picard's son was playing off screen. So I decided to take the first 4 notes of that melody. I'm like, well, I'm going to use that. That's really great. That's really cool. And I used that for the main melody of the theme, and it worked out really great. And Jay was
Awesome.
Jay, when I saw him last summer, because I saw him last summer, right?
Vegas show, yeah.
Yeah. He said, thank you very much for doing that. I got my check in the mail. I was like, great.
Hi guys, welcome to this episode of Creation Entertainment Pop Culture Cinema Squad. Once again, I'm Adam Malin, joined by my esteemed colleague, the great Kit Bowen.
Kit Bowen, hi. How is everything going with you, Adam?
Everything has been great, and I know we did do a deep dive on season 2 of Severance a few weeks ago, but the season has ended now.
Yes.
So we have to kind of dish a little bit more on the ending of the season, some speculations, theories, just kind of talk about what went down. Feel free to.
Well, I was
to
just
get
going to say
started.
that this past season was interesting, to say the least. I wasn't necessarily wowed by it like I was that first season. Because it was so, like I think I've said it was so original to me that I just, it was this season it was good. I think it had some hits and misses in my opinion. It was getting, for me anyway, a little too weird for weird's sake.
It was weird, and also, in order to advance the narrative, certain episodes tended to slow down and or get very interior, and others spread out.
Yeah.
Like Woe's Hollow was an incredible episode.
Yeah, you loved that one, but other people didn't love that one so much.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, but I think we kind of have to talk about the ramifications of what happened in the season finale.
The season finale brought it all together. So,
Let's
spoilers, of course, guys. If you haven't seen it, don't.
And by the way, this whole
why
thing,
haven't
this
you?
whole thing about don't reveal spoilers, then don't watch. Because in all fairness, we're not going to try and get ahead to the next season, but I mean, the supposition is you've watched the season of Severance, so we can discuss it with you creatively.
Yeah. But if you haven't, obviously turn off right now.
Then don't watch this because we have to talk about it. Otherwise we're not having our discourse. But hopefully you'll feel it's well worth it because there's a lot to unpack about that episode.
Woo! Well, first of all, let me just say,
yeah.
I am totally on the whole Mark S. Between actually, I think I love his Innie more than I love his Audi. Yes. I'm more of a, although I wanted Mark's Audi to be together with his wife. I mean, that was something they really set up this season, and I was rooting for him, but then at the same time, Mark's Innie is in love with Helly, and so, there's this, I just thought that was so well played out, especially.
Mark's Audi seemed a bit selfish.
Yes.
Because he's trying to convince Mark's Innie to, it sounds so funny just saying it, he's trying to convince the Innie to take the steps necessary so that the Audi can be with Gemma.
Yes.
But Mark's Innie is in love with Helly.
I know. And there's this whole thing going on. So it was one of the best written scenes I've ever seen.
The back
with
and
the two
forth
of them talking to each other.
It's so crazy.
Oh my God, it was so good. Adam Scott played it beautifully.
And
he's such a good actor.
In that birthing room, and I guess you could go outside the room and you're
an
Audi,
Audi,
and you go in the room and you're an Innie.
So they were recording on the video to each other, and it was just really one of the best scenes in that whole series. I think.
And of course, Mark S.'s decision to abandon Gemma for the life that he wanted with Helly was really intense.
Right. So we have. So basically, they're setting it up. They're setting it up as a will he or won't he? Are they going to see each other? Are they going to meet each other again? Gemma and Mark. Are they going to finally see each other again? And they do. We have this moment, this wonderful, beautiful moment, and they're so happy to see each other. And then they get into that elevator, and you can see them all, change, and now they're Innies again.
It's a triangle.
It's just, I was like, what's happening? And then Helly shows up. Now, some people are saying that Helly showing up right as Gemma has been shut out, has been sent outside, basically. So it's Gemma on the outside looking at her Mark, but it's Innie Mark. And she's like, come, please, come. And he's like hesitating. He's about ready to do it. And then Helly shows up behind him and she says, Mark. And he turns around.
Alluringly. Come here, boy.
Well,
come hither.
See, but here's the thing. She just had that whole conversation with him where she said, you've got to go. You have to let your
But
Addie
she
be."
loves him. She love will, the heart will do what the heart will do.
So
Now-
then they're running down the halls like The Graduate, if anybody's seen that film. They're all running down the hall like going, where are they going to go? I think they're going to go to the goat people.
All right.
That's my opinion.
Okay, well, love those goats. We're gonna do. That's horrible. Those poor goats are sacrificial lambs. Poor little lammies. All right, wait a second. Gemma. What the heck are they doing with the 24 different?
She has 24 different innings.
They're creating. Well, okay, we've already discussed the fact that
All
they're
those rings.
balancing the tempers
Right.
of people with their insidious experiments.
Right.
And the idea is that each of those 24 different, Cold Harbor different rooms was a different balance of tempers.
Right.
To create 24 different personalities.
Right.
Now, are they were alluding to killing Gemma
Right.
at the end of this. So
That was something I
what are
wasn't
they
sure
doing?
about
They're
either.
just trying to get 24 different personality programs, and then they can just drop those into, with that press of a button into anybody. Are people going to become blank slates?
Well, I think that the goal was to get Gemma to a place, or one of her innies, to a place where she had no emotions. So that's why they send her into that last room and tell her to dismantle the baby crib.
Right.
Which is, of course, Gemma's whole, her major conflict through this whole
But
season.
we'll have to
She couldn't
talk
have a
about
baby.
eliminating her after she's done.
Well, maybe it was metaphorical. Maybe it was like Gemma would be gone.
Gemma's personality would be gone.
Gemma's personality
Right.
would be gone. Maybe.
Well, the whole
I don't
damn
know.
thing is creepy.
How
Okay.
did they get Gemma? That's another
Now
question I need.
there's a lot of
No.
action in that episode, and one of the great sequences that I love is when the shit hits the fan with Mr. Drummond.
Horrible guy.
He's the guy. I've hated this guy all season, right?
He's a great actor. He's a Swedish actor. It's Oliver Dari Olafsson.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've seen him in a million
He's a
things.
great actor,
Yeah.
but he's creepy, and he's sort of like the enforcer,
Yeah.
for the family.
Definitely
He's the
Milchek's nemesis. That's for sure.
family.
Can't understand big words.
So he basically comes to grips with Mark, and he's gonna kill Mark, and then thank God that
Brienne of Tarth. Gwendolyn Christie.
Gwendolyn Christie shows up, and that woman looks like she could kill just about anybody, as she did in Game of Thrones.
She sure did. She was the best.
So, well, first of all, that horrible sequence where they're taking the goats and they're putting the goat into the table and the head, and they're gonna sacrifice the poor little goatie.
And then when but you
screwed
know
up.
what? When Drummond hands her the gun to kill the lamb or
Terrible.
whatever, I'm thinking she's gonna shoot him. She's gonna shoot him.
Yeah.
She's gonna shoot him because she's tired of killing her goats.
Well, like everybody that works for Lumen, she also has been emotionally battered.
Yes.
She's an emotionally battered woman.
yes.
And it's like, oh my God.
So that's the cult part of
But
this whole
finally,
thing.
when she sees him choking off Mark, I mean, that's it. That's the end. And then they have that big, fantastic, bloody battle. It's awesome. They're fighting in the hallway there. This, by the way, happens in the creation hallways too. You'll find there's all sorts of people beating up and bleeding each other. It's a riot what goes on out there. No, seriously, Drummond had it coming. I couldn't wait for him to die.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. I know, because
So
he was such an actor.
That's crazy. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Patricia Arquette, the Cobell character. In the penultimate episode, or one or two episodes
Right.
before, we saw her return to the factory, where as a young woman, she was raised in the
Cult. Whatever this cult thing is.
in the working in the ether pits, or whatever the heck that is. But the ether.
That's what I'm saying. Some of this stuff
But
is
I mean,
so weird.
this family, the Lumen, the family, the Eaton's family,
Egan.
family,
Yeah.
they're seriously warped. But she has decided, she's going to finally betray the company.
Because apparently, so she goes basically back to her home where she's grown up in this household where they revere Kier. And meanwhile, she is literally, according to this notebook, she was trying to find this notebook of hers. She has orchestrated, developed all of the things
That's
that they're
right.
doing.
So they essentially absconded with her intellectual property for their own nefarious.
Correct.
Of course, just
And not giving her credit at all.
But honestly, creating that technology in the first place
Yeah.
is screwed up.
Yeah.
It's warped.
Yeah.
Oh, which
yeah.
kind of gets to the whole idea of controlling human personalities, Well, first of all, in the workplace, which is great, because just as we control our creation employees in our workplace, not just kidding, of course, but the
We
idea
need a theme song,
in the
I think.
in the corporate, yes, a creation theme song. In the corporate world, there is a lot of dehumanization,
Yeah.
compartmentalization, and so I know they're kind of doing that as a metaphor, but this is just taking it to a ridiculous end, and then so finally,
But it's also what I find fascinating is like with Mark, for example, he chooses to do this. He chooses to be severed because he wants to get rid of the pain. So, you know, it's the motivation of some of these people who work on the severed floors. Why are they there? And, you know,
well, their addies have that motive.
They're escaping something.
Their Audis may have that escapist motivation, but little do they realize that those feelings are being manipulated and preyed upon by the Egan people who are really more interested in advancing their agenda of controlling human behavior and personalities for their own nefarious version of what a perfectly tempered world should be.
I think that's it.
It's sick.
It's weird.
And by the way,
one of my favorite scenes, though,
yeah,
is, so, you know, for the first half of the series, it was Helena. It was Helly's Audi, who is the daughter of whatever Egan it is.
Yeah.
Egan. And, you know, woe's hollow.
Yeah.
We come to find this out, and then it's
she was infiltrating.
So then it reverts to her innie. So it's now Helly. When the dad comes in,
he's so creepy.
She's in like the little room, whatever, and he comes in and she goes, huh? She goes, who the hell are you? And he says, you tricked me. And I'm like, ooh, why? How? And she's like, what? You know, she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So Helena somehow on the outside is probably manipulating the situation, and maybe Lumen will change. I don't know. What do you think? Lumen might change hands in season 3.
I don't know, but I also think that, is this just their own internal corporate agenda, or are they some way working with the government? I'd hate to think that this is also a governmental program to control human behavior, because it has ramifications, you know, scary ramifications for our whole society.
Yep.
And then the whole idea of them, you know, sticking chips in our heads is, you know, it's not that far away from what Elon Musk is doing now. He's, you know, has this thing where he's putting things in to help people with muscle disease and some things, and evidently those techniques are working. So this is just kind of a step away from that, where they turn on the emotion chip or turn it off. And
well, I mean, it goes all the way back to like Manchurian Candidate. That's
right.
You know, that's actually, I just watched the remake of that with Meryl Streep and Lee Schreiber. But same kind of mind control, creating the perfect soldier. They're always trying to do that.
So there's a lot of these tensions between the innies and the outies. Another great side story is Zach Cherry's character Dylan, and Dylan's wife,
Merritt Weaver, who's one of my favorite actresses.
And I guess his outie becomes aware that she's happier with his innie.
Yep.
And so he decides to terminate the innie, to not have the innie anymore, because he's jealous of his own innie.
Sure.
And which the wife just kind of accedes to. But again, it's this idea that they've created a race of additional personalities.
Yeah.
And what rights do these innie personalities have?
Yeah.
Don't they have the right to live a life of their own? Also, if I was an innie, wouldn't I want to like live a life outside and not just inside of the Lumen building? I mean, you know.
Well, this is what we're at now.
If Mark and Helly want to have a life together, then their innies have to be able to live out in the outside world as innies.
Yeah.
So,
and, you know, we also have the whole reintegration situation, which Mark is already going through. So who knows what will happen.
Let's say he reintegrates. Now, how's he going to choose between Gemma and Helly?
It's a very good question.
Oh, my. I'll have both. whole thing
All right,
is
so
screwed-
finally,
screwed up.
finally, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys all remember the waffle party from the first season, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah.
was a very weird deal with
Yeah.
waffles and strippers.
The whole waffle thing.
This time around, we had a marching band party.
That marching band was. That brings up the fabulous Trammell Tillman.
I love Milchick.
Mr. Milchick, and of course his Vietnamese protege,
Well,
who is
she's gone.
fantastic.
She's gone right now.
She's fantastic too. She's now graduated to the next portion of their program.
Well, I think he just got rid of her. Is basically what he
Um,
facilitated that.
but Mr. Milchick is fantastic, and I think he's had enough. But it was kind of awesome that they turned the screws on him. They locked him in the bathroom. They had the soda machine there. The band is playing. He's like, "Stop playing already! Stop playing!"
And then they Helen and Dylan, they sort of rally the troops and say, "We don't have to be slaves anymore. We can do what we want." Blah blah blah. And then when he finally
It's like an
breaks
Indian
out,
revolt.
Milchick, when he finally breaks out, they're all standing there going,
But the Milchick is such a fascinating
I
character.
love.
And
that
honestly,
character. I don't
they're-
know why. I just love him.
They're so insulting and obnoxious to him. But he does finally tell, I think, Drummond to fuck off at some point, right? Which is really great also.
So that's why I like the arc. They're giving him an arc, basically. They're showing that not only is he, a company man at first, but now since he's in charge and and Drummond can't understand anything he's saying because he's using too big of words.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know, right. They
He's
have to
like-
write him up a report because actually he's very eloquent, which
Yes.
is nice. Not unlike you. So, in other words, every time you talk nice now, I'm going to have to write up a report about you.
And slide it over the desk. To
Anyway,
me, so-
in conclusion, I mean, it was a great couple of seasons. Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller have
All right.
crafted an
Unbelievable.
incredible story, and we're so eagerly awaiting season 3. Do we any skinny about when it's coming?
No,
When do they
I
go
just
into
hope it's not
production?
3 years because that
Yeah,
was a lot.
I know
that was a long
waiting
time
for
to
another
wait.
season, so it's ridiculous already.
Yeah.
You know.
And I don't. If you guys don't know already, many of you do. You can watch all the way to the end, and they do like a little
Yeah,
deep
which is
dive
good.
into
Yeah.
each episode, and I
Always
highly
watch
recommend doing
those.
those
Yeah,
because it's
always-
very
always.
interesting.
What's annoying is that the streamers, before that comes,
They have to go through all the credits.
They run the credits and then they move you on to another show.
Yes,
And cut that off. It's insidious.
I've learned.
Like,
You hit the back button.
It's so
Hit the back
bad.
button.
Don't do that. Let me watch this thing at the end of it. You're like not letting me watch it. But anyway, in conclusion, we loved it.
Yes.
This is our definitive deep dive
Yes.
now, finishing off on season 2 of Severance. And when season 3 comes, you can be sure we'll be dishing and kvetching about it plenty, okay?
I'm looking forward to it to
Yeah.
see what happens. so.
Anyway, always a pleasure, kid.
You too,
Thank
Adam.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Hi, I'm Adam Malin, back with my esteemed partner, Mr. Gary Brown.
Okay, so today you have a question for me, perchance.
It's more of kind of a reminiscence for us.
Okay.
I want to talk about the great hotels of Manhattan in the 1970s.
Yeah, there's some good stories there. Can we start with the Commodore, which was the first, I think it was one of the first projects that Trump did in New York when he bought it, but we were there before.
Yeah, well,
It's now the Trump,
let me give the
Okay.
genealogy
Okay.
of succession of hotels we used.
you know
I'm
this,
such a nerd. We started with the New Yorker Hotel
right? That's
down
still
the
there.
block from where my dad's office was.
That's 8th and 33rd?
34th and 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah, right down the block from his office in the Pennsylvania building.
Yeah,
So we ran our first couple of shows there, right?
definitely 71.
And I think 72 also.
I don't know. We might have moved by then.
About. I think second out of the gate was the Statler Hilton.
Under that name.
Yeah, when it was the Statler, before it became the Penta
And then
and then
something
the
else.
Hotel Pennsylvania.
It was back
It
to
was
the
the
original
Statler
name.
Hilton.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Okay. And then I think the next hotel after that was the Commodore.
A Commodore, which is now the Grand Hyatt. That's what it is.
So the Commodore the property was purchased by Donald Trump's group,
Yeah.
and they decided to bring it down to its girders and rebuild it as the Grand Hyatt.
Yeah, so this use of like frames that are left from these old buildings,
Yeah.
they did it that way. But when they knocked down recently the Penna and the Statler Hill, and they just got rid of everything.
That's right.
Why is that? Well, what's the reason?
Well, this is interesting. Even though they did tear down to the studs the Commodore to the Grand Hyatt, when I went back in there as the Grand Hyatt,
There were similar things.
there were some of the moldings,
Yeah.
some of the case goods and moldings of the entrances to the ballrooms still existed at the Grand Hyatt. So when you're in the Grand Ballroom foyer, some of the wall moldings, plaster moldings, were still from the Commodore, which was very interesting.
So the walls would have still have to have been there.
Well, some of the walls.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably ripped a lot of that out and put in new drywall.
When were those hotels originally built? In the 20s?
I mean, these hotels were like the 20s to 30s. I mean, our thing was to inherit all the old dowager properties
Yeah, that no one else would
that
look.
were
That they couldn't find other people.
aging. Yeah,
Right.
But from what you said, however, is that these days they literally have much different building foundational materials that they use. So they're not even going to retain the same iron or steel frames that those old hotels were built on. They're just going to tear them down to the ground. And in fact, it was very emotional to watch them take down the Hotel Pennsylvania, as it was finally called,
I was sad
Our
about that
Statler
too.
Hilton.
Yeah. I had been in there several
There's
times.
a million great stories. All right, one great story is that I had my dachshund puppy, and I used to bring Max
I remember.
up onto the roof of the Statler Hilton at night after the
take a
show
peek.
was older to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I do remember.
Overlooking Manhattan.
And one time we saw the fireworks for July 4th because Suling used to run his show there.
Interestingly enough, that might have also been over at the McAlpin Hotel.
Oh, geez, I think you're right. That had a roof too.
Yeah.
But you weren't supposed to go out on that one.
No. But do you remember when we ran a show in the pentop room of the Statler Hilton and we accidentally blocked some doors with vendor tables?
That was, yes.
And then the next thing you know, the fire marshal comes and he says, well, you got to move those tables. And we complied immediately.
Yeah, that
And
didn't matter.
he said, all right, you guys are going down to criminal court in Manhattan.
Well, I remember that. And we were like 17.
You know, we were kids.
Yeah, that was horrible.
So we got to go down to criminal court.
Yeah.
And
We had
to face the
we had
judge.
It was a citation.
We had to face the judge, and I had to go to the bathroom. So I went into this is a criminal building.
Yeah.
So I had to go to the bathroom, and I was like going to the bathroom with criminals all around me.
God.
This little kid. Anyway, the judge, I remember him saying, "Well, you gentlemen, don't ever do this again." And
Yeah.
we're like, yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, right. That's what we did, and we didn't. Hopefully,
It wasn't intentional. I mean,
no, but it's still scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was this huge court
All right,
building.
give me a good New York hotel story.
Oh boy.
Now,
There-
you know
there were a
that
lot of-
pentop room, which is where we,
Oh, I remember that. I do have a good
the
story.
long room.
Yeah. Okay. So we had a show. One day was Star Trek.
Yeah.
And Shatner was the guest.
Yeah.
And one day was Ben Browder, and we did a Farscape show.
Oh, wow.
You were there.
Yeah, no, but.
Okay.
yeah.
So that was Saturday and Sunday, and I think Monday night I had walked by the Madison Square Garden, and they were doing the reunion of the Jackson 5 with Michael Jackson. It was like this huge show with every star.
Wow.
So I got tickets for that and
Yeah.
saw it. And then the next morning was September 11th. With
Oh, my God.
it was the day after, and
What are you saying? You were in Manhattan when that happened?
I was on a plane the day before leaving, and the plane was delayed. But it was all the same weekend. Our show, not that matters.
That's crazy.
And the Jackson thing, which is like
What
the
day
most
of the week was September 11th? Like the Monday or the Tuesday?
I think it was Tuesday.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so we got out on Monday,
Yeah.
the day after the show, and then it happened Tuesday. Yeah, I was home when it happened in California. So yeah, well,
That's crazy. You know, that pentop room at the Statler Hilton was also the site of the first Star Trek convention.
Yes, which we were at.
Which was run by the committee.
Right.
And I was in that room sitting on the floor when Gene Roddenberry came up on stage.
Yeah.
And I remember, well, it was, first of all, the fact that people could just be, sitting on floors everywhere was
Yeah,
packed.
that ended.
Yeah, that's not good.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Not good fire marshal mojo.
No, we got away well, I don't know if we did, but a lot of things
Yeah.
were done back then. We were all kids in old hotels.
But I mean, it's kind of was a historic moment for Star Trek. Who would have known, sitting on that floor watching Roddenberry in 1972, that starting in 1979, we had booked Walter Koenig, and then began our succession into essentially being the Star Trek convention company. I mean, we defined the
There's a
Star
lot of
Trek
them, yeah.
convention marketplace.
At that time, you know,
Yeah.
now even still.
So
I have a funny story about the Statler Hill.
yeah,
Okay, so we were young and we needed to save money, and we had a huge staff. So in those days, they actually had metal keys for the rooms.
yeah, right.
So we would get the room, and then
Yeah.
we'd keep the keys. And then the next show, because we were running them all the time, we would see if the room was open.
Oh, that's fine.
You know, you just knock, and if no one answered, you open it up, and staff members would sleep in there.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Yeah, we saved
That's
a lot of money.
ridiculous. Now
We might be in business just because of the money
that's
we
right.
saved.
Now you know that at the Commodore Hotel, they used to give us the top floor all to ourselves. And
Yeah.
that was where Eisenhower
Eisenhower.
ran his presidential campaign, I believe, in 1956.
That yeah, he ran twice.
But did
That
you
would be
know
one.
why they gave us the whole top floor of the Commodore?
No.
Because the HVAC didn't work, and
And
they couldn't sell those rooms.
oh,
So unbeknownst to us, because I used to say, "Boy, these rooms are really hot."
that's why we got
And I
it.
found out that
Oh.
there was no HVAC.
I
working
do
on
remember
that
World
floor.
Globe in there.
There was a globe.
And it
yeah.
was like huge.
I went to the bathroom on Mamie's toilet.
You also played Elton John's piano.
Well, that was
Later
at the
Rio.
the Palazzo. Oh,
Yeah.
we have tons of stories about the Rio. This is New York hotels. There was a couple of others. There was the Diplomat. That was falling apart. Remember that?
The Diplomat was like you had to take a little elevator with a metal thing to get up to the ballroom, and we would have 1,000 people.
It was
no?
a total fire. hazard.
totally.
Yeah. Then
Oh,
there
and
was,
then they started using it as a welfare hotel
which is
when we were still
terrible.
running there.
That's right. While we were running a show,
There
there
were
were
people-
welfare people.
I
there.
know there were people
that's
sitting
funny.
in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Then there was the Taft Hotel where we ran.
A lot of shows.
What was
once
second?
a month.
What was second Sunday? That was Suling's.
Suling used to run a comic book convention every month, and then
Yeah.
he stopped, and then we started doing it for
Right.
a while.
However,
At the
in
Taft.
order for us to be able to book space at the Taft Hotel, we had to offer a little
Oh, on this episode.
skin to Phil Suling.
Did we?
We sure did.
Why?
Phil said, "If you guys want to run at the Taft," because he was still, I think, doing things there.
All right, I don't think we would have competed directly on a monthly thing.
He
but I
was
don't-
okay with it as long as he had
That's
a little skin in the game.
All right, that
Also, just wanted to remind you of the Americana, which became
Oh
the
yeah, I
Sheraton
forgot
Center.
about. Yeah, that's 52nd and 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did huge shows there in well, it wasn't the Sheridan Ballroom. What was it?
It was the Americana Ballroom at that point,
And
but
then
yeah,
it changed.
became the Sheraton Center.
Oh, we also ran at the New York Sheridan across the street.
That is correct.
Forgot
Yeah.
about that one.
So there was a slew of hotels that no longer exist. Of course, there was the Roosevelt, which
Roosevelt.
became notorious recently as the hotel where the Southern governors would ship.
Yeah,
Migrants.
migrants. Yeah,
Up-
it became a migrant hotel.
We ran a Creation Marvel Comics anniversary party at the Roosevelt Hotel. You might remember that.
Oh, I know.
We did that
I don't remember
with,
that at
with
all.
with our relationship with Marvel. But the Roosevelt, we ran a lot of shows.
I
at as
remember
well.
we had DeForest Kelly in there once. Yeah, and that was great. Yeah, that was a lot of
and
memories
then I
there.
believe we did at maybe once at the Biltmore.
In
There
New
was
York?
a Biltmore in New York.
No,
yeah.
no, one out here in L.A.
No, there was one in New York too. There were 4
Yeah,
hotels
I know part of that.
that were in a square.
Yeah.
And we ran, I believe, at 3 of them.
I don't remember.
Anyway, this for our most of our viewers, this is ancient history, and these hotels don't even exist anymore. But they were the foundation of our early creation
Yeah, and
events
also the hotel business.
in the 1970s.
Yeah, that was fun.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, this is The Business of Creation with Gary Berman and Ryan T. Husk, aka The Gary Berman Show with Gary Berman. How are you? And by the way, can I ask, why did you want to do this segment?
I wanted to do it for one reason and one reason only, to make fun of you for 20 minutes.
Oh, What a relief.
Yeah, I know. No, actually, I wanted to explore all the things that Adam and I, kind of learned in the 40 years we've been doing this. We made a lot of mistakes, but I want to try to pass that along. And particularly those who are wanting to start a business about something they're passionate about, because now the internet has kind of leveled everything off. Everyone can get into it, but there are problems and mistakes you can make. So I want to try to pass those along.
I think that's great, because probably the most important thing in business is making mistakes and learning from it. And there are going to be so many people watching this and listening to this that want to learn from the 54 years of making mistakes and successes. So, first things first, you want to talk about what?
Well, do you want this segment to be hilarious and really move quickly, or do you want it to fit in with the rest of the podcast?
I don't want it to be funny at all, but I think the viewers want it to be hilarious. So please be hilarious.
I shall. No problem. Okay, so I wanted to pass along two important things today. First thing is to know who you're talking to. Really important. I've had people, pitch me on stuff, services or products, and they don't know anything about creation. So, that's no good. So on the other hand, when you do know who you're talking to, like if I get hooked up some way to talk to a producer, I kind of do the research on who they are, where they grew up, what college they went to, and the colleges are really good. I just had a conversation. So the guy went to University of Pennsylvania, my school, and so that was a way in just by name dropping it. And then I said, that school is worth going to other than name dropping like I just did, and he laughed, and it was great. So those connections that you can make in your head and know what you're going to say when you're pitching something or talking to someone like important, that I would suggest that. That's like a big deal. And the second one is even like, you think it's stupid to even have to say, but looking the person in the eye that you're talking to. I had like so many people come into my office, people being interviewed for a job or again trying to sell something, and they're looking out the window or to the side. And I know some people do have social anxiety about looking, so you do have to discount that. But if you can do it, you should. And almost like if you can't, you got to kind of express that in a way, because you won't get further, at least with me. I had to just tell someone here that's new, I'm not that intimidating. Just talk to me and look at me, because I think that's like kind of major. So two simple things right off the bat, I think will really be helpful for people starting out a new business, or just people trying to sell salespeople. Those two are my things.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you are very intimidating, though. You may not know this, but most people quiver when you walk by. So
we can edit that out. I'm the fun.
Let's talk about the first part of that, knowing who you're talking to. Or
now with the internet, I mean, you can find out, anyone's career or background. So you see where the commonality is, and then you lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get into the business stuff. You soften the person up.
Have you ever made the mistake of not knowing the person with whom you are speaking?
No, but I'll tell you what mistake I did make, which is kind of worse. So I was meeting with this big producer in the rock music business, like one of the legendary people. So I figured, I'll try to find a connection there. And he had worked with a famous rock group according to AI. So I did the research on AI.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know. So it came up with this credit that he had, which was like the super famous credit, and the album cover was done by Frazetta, who was one of the most famous fantasy artists, who was at one of our early conventions. So I figured, all right, that's a connection.
Yeah.
So I had this big story about how he produced it, and he probably chose the artist to do it, and he said I wasn't there. So that was terrible. So you can't depend on AI. At least now, you still have to do Google. Because it just makes it. Oh, and then you say, I think you might have made a mistake to AI, and then it pops up, yeah, I apologize. That was a mistake.
Oh, see, AI is very polite. That's good.
Yeah, but you don't know to do it unless you know.
Mm-hmm.
So now I do.
You know what's interesting? You say this, and I'm running back in my memory. Not even a month ago, you literally took your own advice. Still to this day, 53 plus years later, you were doing research on the people you were going to have a meeting with so that you could have a connection I won't give specific examples, but I do remember you were having a meeting with these people, and before you had the meeting, you made a connection with them. It was
Yes,
very
just
important.
as I said.
Sorry.
Thank you for repeating everything, but it's interesting coming from you after I said it 3 seconds ago. It works. Keep going. You're
That
like,
was it.
that's it. It's like one of those cheap documentary shows that every time it comes back to a commercial that repeats
Oh, God.
the last 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
I'm like, did we just see that?
I'm sorry. If I do end up like that, I would be very sad.
No, you're great.
Oh, what a relief.
No, your podcasts are really interesting, especially that segment about the carpet patterns at the Rio.
Okay. The carpet patterns at the Rio, for any Star Trek fan, this is actually a very big story. People love the carpet patterns at Dragon Con. I've never been to Dragon Con.
But you spent a whole hour on it, and did you see Sirach's face when you were talking about it? His eyes were rolling.
It happens. I'm used
I
to
think
that.
he may want to leave, start his own podcast. He kind of told me that.
That's Sirach Lofton. He was Jake Sisko on Star Trek.
We know.
Deep Space Nine. Also, the carpet was very important on the Enterprise and rebuilding the Enterprise bridge.
All right, we're done. That's the end of our segment. Thank you, Ryan,
No, the point
and
is...
the many production people out there. Thank you. I'm out of here. That's the end.
Okay.
We're done.
That was it?
That's it. It's called Discussing the Business of Creation with Gary and Ryan.
Okay.
I thought it was the Gary Berman show.
Well, that's what people will call it.
Okay.
For the it's like the Jack Benny show.
Mhm.
The Jack Benny program.
The Jack Benny program, and people used to go up to him. People used to go up to him and say, "Do you mind that Don Wilson or Rochester gets all the laughs all the time?" And he said, "What's the name of the show?" Jack Benny show.
I cannot believe how much Jeff Russo has actually done. It's crazy.
That man is uber talented, and I feel so fortunate that he joined us on our show. Really excited about that.
Yeah.
So, we've got something pretty big for Supernatural fans, don't we?
Yes. So the next big show that we've got on our 25 tour, The Road So Far, The Road Ahead, is in Minneapolis, April 25th through 27th at the Hyatt Regency in Minneapolis. So if you are in that area at all, you definitely need to come and join us for a most excellent hunt in the area of Minneapolis. Supernatural fans, they get that reference.
Let me tell
Do
you
you
something.
get that reference?
Oh, I get that reference. Nobody does Supernatural conventions like Creation does.
Nope.
We'll see you there.
Yes. And stay tuned for another episode of the Creation Entertainment Podcast, where we'll be interviewing some more great people and talking about some great sci-fi genre shows. So stay tuned for more.
See you next time.